You're saying that the story of what's happening in the White House is being misreported.
Yes.
Maybe you don't want to believe what is coming out in the press, but it's not just...
I read all of it. I read all of it and I watch your show.
It's not just reporters saying this. It's members of your own party who are saying this. Ben Sasse was talking to Hugh Hewitt last week, and he said this about this op-ed. It's just so similar to what so many of us hear from senior people around the White House, 3 times a week. So it's really troubling and yet in a way not surprising. That's Ben Sasse. Bob Corker, another person. I think the biggest issue they're going to have is figuring out who would not have written a letter like that. So what do you say to them?
I think it's really ironic to have senators trying to criticize the White House because they think it's somehow dysfunctional when we have the most dysfunctional Congress, and Ben Sasse himself says that on a regular basis. I don't think either of those gentlemen, I have a high regard for Ben Sasse, but I don't think either of those gentlemen actually knows what's going inside the West Wing. Look, and both of them have been critics of the president and his policies. And so it's important to separate those two things. There's a lot of chaos that's accurately described that has been caused by an outsider president coming into Washington, D.C. with a 2x4 and shaking everything up. There are a lot of Republicans who are uncomfortable.
That he's just an outsider
Let me
president.
just finish the statement. There's a lot of Republicans who are uncomfortable with the amount of change and sometimes unorthodox positions on issues that Donald Trump has brought to the city. But to seem to convert that into a White House team that isn't functioning on getting that agenda wrong, even though sometimes they do it better some days than other days, that is what is misreported.
Isn't that a bit simplistic, though? I mean, you have people telling Bob Woodward that the president is almost getting us into World War III. That he's got to be pulled. He's got to be pulled back from the brink. That James Mattis has to slow walk the decisions that the president wants to make. He wants to assassinate Assad. He wants to pull the family members of troops in South Korea out of South Korea, which would probably provoke North Korea, potentially get us into World War III. Those are very serious things.
They are.
And then on the other hand,
I think that analysis is somewhat simple too, because you have a president. Sure, go ahead.
Let me finish. The other thing is the president himself. It's not as if he's just trying to change policy. The president himself is lying on a daily basis. He's not telling the truth.
I don't think that's right.
Well, that's true though. When you look at the economy,
no, it's not.
It is true. When you look at it is true. I mean, the Washington Post has a tally.
The Washington Post, believe it or not, for Republicans.
I'll show you an example. I'll show you an example just.
And I'll show you examples where the Washington Post is getting things wrong. So it goes both ways.
Not getting 4,000 and
that is
plus that thing wrong in the last
I'd like a chance
days.
to respond here. I'd like a chance to talk now. I think what you're saying is overly simplistic. You have a president who actually communicates more to the whole globe than any president we've ever seen. If you want to know what he thinks about something, just turn to his Twitter feed. The idea that there's some kind of secretive aspect to Donald Trump's opinions is ridiculous. He puts it all out there for people to see. And the problem with Bob Woodward, I've read about half of his books. I hope to read this book. I have a lot of respect for him. But it's easy to take a lot of little details in a book and to come up with the wrong conclusion as to what's really happening in a White House. And if his conclusion is that the president is somehow unmoored from reality and is a danger, I would say that that is a gross mischaracterization of this president. And as far as the lying is concerned, every single one of these supposedly independent outfits that are determining whether or not the president is lying or telling the truth are funded by left-wing donors like George Soros. And I'm sorry, I want NBC News and other media outlets to rely on their own reporting and not on the reporting of these websites and blog sites that say he lies 9,000 times a day.
Let me put something on the screen for you. Let's talk about a tweet the president sent out today on the economy. He says the GDP rate, 4.2%, is higher than the unemployment rate, 3.9% for the first time in over 100 years. There are some apples to oranges there. We'll leave that aside. It is not, though, for the first time in over 100 years. That is factually incorrect.
When was the last time that was true?
That happened during George W. Bush, 2006. It's happened multiple times before that. That's
factually, do you think when he said the years? So
is he just not aware of how those numbers work, or is he putting it out there knowing it's false? What's happening there?
All I would say is this. is that the apples and the oranges when it comes to economic analysis actually matter. What kind of data are you looking at?
No, hold on, Matt. Don't go to apples and oranges.
You're missing,
he says it's the first time in over 100 years. That is not
Katy,
true.
But the part that I don't know how many years it is, but what's the point of the tweet? The point of the tweet is that for all Americans, liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans, no matter the color of your skin, there's greater economic opportunity today.
But why won't he just come out and say something that is true, that doesn't force everybody to fact check him? Is the point that he enjoys it when the press fact checks him, because then he can make it look like we're his foil? Is that intentional what he's doing, or does he just not understand the numbers, and does he not care about being correct when he's talking to the American people? Or
when the press gets it wrong, are they lying? This is my problem, Katy. My problem when you say he lies.
And when we do get it wrong, we come out and we say we got it wrong, and we apologize and we correct it.
Katy, all I would say is that you are making a moral determination when you say a politician lies. There are times when politicians get it right and politicians get it wrong. On that tweet, I don't know how many years it's been, but I do know this for Americans. It's historic to have the unemployment rate be below the GDP rate. And that's a good thing for all of us. So what you do is you try to find the one little way in which there's a flaw, and you miss the general point.
He could just come out and say something true, and that would be the end of it. Just say something true, and that would be the end of it, and we'd report that that is true.
He did say something true.
He does,
is it true? Is it true that the unemployment rate is historically low and the economic growth is historically high?
It's not true that it's the first time in over 100 years. It is
How many
not
years is it?
True. 2006
years?
was not 100 years ago.
Okay, but the point is this, which is the economy is doing well, and you should cover that.
I would like to cover that, but I'm forced to fact check the president on the smallest little things.
And we are forced to fact check you. By the way, it's going both ways. There are plenty of things I watch on your network that I don't find to be factually inaccurate. Why don't we not morally judge each other on our motive and simply get to the facts? When the president's wrong on the facts, call him on that. But don't take the next step by saying he's immoral and a liar. And I won't do the same thing to NBC when they make mistakes.
Here's my problem with that statement, and I've been following the president for a long time, as you very well know. The president said a lot of things in the campaign trail that we corrected him over and over again on, gave him a long leash on in terms of whether or not he was for the war in Iraq or against the war in Iraq. And he continued to say these things over and over and over again, knowing that they were not true. That's one example. There are examples of crime stats that he did. These things, when he says them over and over and over again, after he has already been fact-checked, then you have nothing to, then the only conclusion is that he knows he's lying, and he's doing it on purpose.
Let me just tell you, for half of the country's split, unfortunately, right? And if you look at poll after poll after poll, we're very polarized.
I believe 34% of the country says the president's not or is.
We're very polarized politically. And when you, just so you know, if you want to be viewed and your show wants to be viewed as just calling the balls and strikes and the facts, when you take the extra step to say the president is a quote-unquote liar and that even when he's corrected, he's continued to lie, do you understand why people who have a conservative or Republican point of view and actually see the facts and come to a different moral conclusion, while they have trouble understanding why you have to make the moral step? Why do you have to say that he's done something immoral? You could have a disagreement on what the truth is, and I think that's what's happening in our society more and more. I actually think Donald Trump was against the war in Iraq. I watched all that coverage. Yes, there was some confusion, but there was no confusion with me with watching him and listening to him in his lead up to run for the president and during the war. I worked for the president who is the one who executed that war. It's painful to hear those criticisms, but those criticisms did come from Donald Trump frequently.
I'm just going to leave it here, Matt, and it's been enjoyable having you on. We appreciate it.
Thank you,
Latest
Katy.
Quinnipiac poll, 32% of the country finds him honest. Just 32%. So.
And what about the news media, Katy? What is you look at the poll for how the American people view the news media. You're at the cellar. So
that's
it's
on the rise.
Unfair.
Actually, their opinion of the news media is on the rise. Matt Schlapp, I'm going to have to leave it there.
On the rise? Well, that's
Matt
quite an
Schlapp,
accomplishment. Congratulations.
Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
All right, bye-bye.
And we're continuing to wait on the...